education.
Yeah.
You're a big guy with education. So tell them the steps that led up to getting to Power 99.
Okay. Thank you for asking me. But well, obviously, graduating high school, and then I went off to Illinois State University, Normal, and I was in the program for the School of Communication at Illinois State. I would say to you in its infancy, but but
now you worked at the station there as well?
Yeah, well, not the campus station.
Okay.
I worked for the public radio station.
Okay.
WGLT 89.1 FM, and it was the one of the public radio stations for that area of Central Illinois, which covered Bloomington Normal, and then also Peoria, even though Peoria had their station there.
Right.
Bradley University, which is our rival. But I started there in 1979 because they were looking for a jazz announcer. And a friend of mine told me about the posting. This is back when they would hang up the job application in the hall or something. And so, the guy was like, Joe, you should be all over this or whatever, right? And so I went up and applied, and excuse me, program director is Peter Dominowski, who's a big, he's now a big legend, if you will,
right,
in public
like
radio.
Yourself.
Yeah, well, yeah. And so, thank you again. So, I told Peter, I was Miles Davis's younger half brother. And, I knew jazz and blah, blah, blah. And so what he did, I filled out an application, and then he gave me an artist test.
Really?
Mostly of artists that weren't fusion jazz. This was when fusion jazz rock, as it was called, was still new and, burning new ground. And my thing was that, not that the traditional forms were not important, but I was born in 1959, so this was the cutting edge music, and so I passed it. And the first night that I went on the air, I had some training, but the first real night I was on the air, I brought my record collection with me. I brought a crate of records, which, but so that's how I got started. It was February 23rd, 1979. Wow. And then what happened was my program, which was called More Jazz, and let me add that I was getting paid. I never worked in radio for free. But
good for you.
Yeah. Never did college radio. But eventually the program became very popular, that it showed up in the Central Illinois Arbitron ratings.
Right, I was going to say it's going to be Arbitron.
Yeah, it was the first time a public radio station
that's very rare.
Showed up, right?
Yep.
And so that's when we knew that it was, popular, obviously, beyond just McLean County. That's where Illinois State is located.
Right.
And and it showed up in the ratings books over in Peoria. So, the newspapers came out to interview me and everything. And, then I also started doing news, and classical, a little bit classical.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my thing, they hired me for jazz, but I would sub for classical because I grew up studying classical. I used to take piano lessons.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew about, Bach, Schubert, Franz Liszt,
You had that gene.
Joseph Haydn. Yeah,
You had that gene
yeah,
and proof of it with your brother.
yeah. So it was a very great experience because it opened up my mind to not only help me graduate, matriculate and get my it learning empowered me as a broadcaster and vice versa. The broadcasting empowered learning because this is back when public radio was called educational radio.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in my mind, having that experience, I looked at the world and said I could do anything, meaning you can conjure up in your mind anything.
Yep.
And I used to get interviews with a lot of musicians who were former sidemen of Miles or wanted to play with Miles or
Yeah.
was studioing with Miles. It was, this was during the period when Miles didn't play for 5 years.
Right.
But I still see my mother lived in New York, and I was at Illinois State. She lived with her sister, my late aunt,
Right.
and so I would come to New York, go to the jazz clubs, get interviews with these people, and edit them and bring them back and edit them and play them for my audience. So I was the only guy that would have interviews with, Herbie Hancock, the
Right.
Brecker brothers, Bob Burke, all of the hot people at the time. I'd seek them out in New York even the sidemen.
Right.
So that helped. And some of them got to the National Public Radio head office. And I would get credit for some of the audio that they would use for the National Public Radio items,
Right.
So that started my career, but it also expanded my intellectual horizon. And I understood then, even though, music is a popular form of communication, in particular R&B and education to me was important because you still, in my opinion, had a responsibility to your audience. If your personality, you could talk all the hip talk and be hip,
Sure.
but you still have, because you're touching people, you have a responsibility to also educate and influence them.
Yep.
And so that was my theory. Now, with that being my theory, in popular radio, let's just say I oftentimes encountered resistance about that, which really was just immaturity and jealousy as I look back, because you can't tell me to this day how that hurts your audience. If you still hip, but if you're out with people or you have that reputation, you have a dignified reputation, that's good for your audience. It's good for your product at the radio station, and it's good for humanity.
Yep.
It's just,
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that was how I got started. And after that, I went into pop radio with Magic 108 in St. Louis, my hometown R&B station. And then I went up to New Hampshire to work in.
Now, did you grow up in St. Louis?
Yeah, East St. Louis.
Okay.
Yeah, I grew up in East St. Louis. Born in Millstadt, Illinois.
Right.
Millstadt, Illinois at the time was a 100% German American immigrant enclave 25 miles southeast of St. Louis, Missouri,
Right.
on the Illinois side. And I was born there in 1959.
You guys had a big farm there.
Yeah, on a 160-acre farm. My father was the late Dr. Miles Dewey Davis. My mother was Josephine Haynes Davis, a trailblazer in education.